Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama Bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. A lot to talk about in the news this week, and joining us this week from the Virginian Pilot, we're glad to have political reporter Julian Walker with us, as well as editorial page editor Don Lozado. Columnist and political blogger Vivian Page joins us, along with Dr. Charles Dunn, who is the Distinguished Professor of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. Welcome, and thanks to all of you for being with us tonight.
Good to be here.
It's been a long time since we've talked. I'm kind of excited for this conversation. We are now on Friday night, last Sunday night. Big news, out of nowhere seemingly, but clearly not. Chuck Dunn, what do you make of this announcement of the death of Osama bin Laden?
Well, there are three things that we have to look at. One is, how well did President Obama handle the matter? I think he handled it exceptionally well. Really could not have asked for anything better. Secondly, we have to look at the poll ratings post-event. And his poll numbers are going up. So with higher poll numbers, how will he utilize those? If he's like Bush 1, whose numbers went up, Bush 1 frittered them away. If he's like Bush 2, he will utilize them in the short run with regard to gaining some benefits on policies out of the Congress. Third thing we have to look at is the Republican Party. And Republicans now are in a strait betwixt two, between the devil and the deep blue sea. Obama has been their point of attack. They can't attack him now, at least for a little while. There will come a time when they can. So those are the three principal things that I think we have to evaluate.
Don Lozado, one of the things that I read a lot on the comments to your editorials around this issue has to do with whether it's appropriate and the prospect of safety issues to identify what we are calling SEAL Team 6.
Right. I mean, we mentioned SEAL Team 6 in an editorial. I mean, I think the news side has done so as well. I would think, I wasn't privy to the conversation in the newsroom, but there is extraordinary care taken whenever local guys are involved. Yeah. And I think in this case, none of us would do anything that would go beyond what's already in the public domain. I mean, we would not name our friends who we all have who are SEALs. So we would not, there's a line beyond which we will not go. I think some people are just using this as an opportunity to slash at the paper, as they always will. But I think, the folks I know who work there are extraordinarily responsible about this kind of thing.
So the question then, where do we go from here? I mean, Vivian Page, you know as well as I do that the president got a lot of criticism for amping up activities in Afghanistan. Do people now sort of stand back and say, whoa, maybe there's something to this after all?
I definitely think that we're going to see more pressure, though, to remove troops from Afghanistan and certainly from Iraq. We're in a situation where now that the major threat has been taken out, I'm already seeing calls to withdraw the troops on a much faster basis than where they had been before. So I think we're going to see more of that in the coming weeks.
I was talking with some military people earlier today who were saying that they were even, in some respects, more encouraged by was the information that they were able to get at the site. They were able to take back, because apparently it was such a surprise. They were able to collect a lot of computer data and what have you, and so the process begins, of course, to sift through all of that and see where we go from here. Speaking of sifting through things, there was some sifting through of the redistricting plans. The governor came back and said, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I would like to invite you to give it another try.
Indeed, he did, and they did give it another try, and now they have submitted another bill, and the governor has signed it. The governor's primary objection was that the Senate passed it directly along party line vote, 22-18, with Democrats in the majority, which enabled the governor to point to the House Republican plan and say that that was passed with much more broad support, bipartisan support, as he characterized it. And so he said that there were some obvious flaws with the Senate plan and told them to go back and fix it. The local headline for us here in Hampton Roads is that Virginia Beach retains its two distinct hometown senators, if you will, but Suffolk loses out potentially because it looks like Fred Quayle becomes the sacrificial lamb here.
Interesting.
Well, it's one of those things where, I mean, it was in everybody's interest to vote for the Senate plan as it was in everybody's interest to vote for the House plan. It becomes incumbent protection rather than being an actual redistricting plan that serves the voters. And so that's why you get greater support for the House plan and greater support for the Senate plan, because they both do better jobs now of protecting the people who are already in office.
And so from here, this is an important distinction because I think the Commonwealth is the first state to send its plan to Department of Justice because we are a voting rights state. Julian, unpack that for us. Why do we have to do that? What does that mean?
Well, the Voting Rights Act is something that goes back several decades, signed under President Johnson, and basically it was intended to correct or prevent changes to election process and to voting that would inhibit minority participation. Virginia, as a state that was perceived in the past to have limited black voting participation, is a state that is governed by the Voting Rights Act, and therefore any changes to its election patterns or its election practices face review by the Justice Department to make sure that it is not infringing upon minority voting interests.
And do they have, you wonder, is there someone they take this to ahead of time and say, can you just do a quick sniff test on this to make sure that this is okay? I mean, is there a process like that in place, or is it really they do the best job they can, they send it up there, and they really don't know what's going to happen to it?
Well, it is reviewed by the administration. It is also reviewed by the Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, in this instance. He has someone on his staff, one of his senior deputies, who is well versed in this area of the law, and he's the point person for reviewing it, as well as the administration.
And the Attorney General has said he thinks this meets muster.
He has indicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, we may be first at finishing up this process, but we do have other states that are in the same position as we are. Mississippi is one of them. They actually passed their redistricting plan back in April on the House side, in March on the House side, but they can't seem to get a Senate plan done, so they're in the process of actually going to court and trying to figure out whether or not the court is going to make that decision. We still have the opportunity in Virginia for our plan to be rejected by the Justice Department. This is the first time in a long time that there has been a Democratic Justice Department. So there's still the possibility that the plan would not pass what they consider to be constitutionality, but I don't see that happening. I think we're going to, the plan that we have for the House and Senate is probably going to be passed on by the Justice Department. The congressional plan, which we haven't submitted yet, will be a different argument.
And just to remind our viewers, Senator Quayle may be in some jeopardy, I suppose, in the Senate. But House-wise, what is the implication?
There were 4 seats
region?
that were moved in Hampton Roads. Just 1 seat from out of Hampton. Actually, 2 seats out of Hampton Roads. We had Robin Abbott over in the 93rd, who no longer lives in the district she currently represents, and we have the elimination from Hampton Roads of the 87th House District, where Paula Miller is and where I live, and the district has been split actually between the 83rd House District, most of which is in Virginia Beach and is represented by Chris Stolley, and the 100th House District, which is most of it is on the Eastern Shore and is a Linwood Lewis district.
And so what are you hearing about the political futures of Robin Abbott and Paula Miller?
Robin, I understand, is weighing whether she's going to move into the district that now basically has no incumbent. It is basically an open seat. If she moves, she'll be moving into a district that has no incumbent at all, or whether she's going to stay where she is and challenge Glenn Oder, who is the incumbent in the district where she lives. With the 87th House District having been moved to Northern Virginia, Paula Miller, I don't think, is going to challenge Linwood Lewis, which is where she physically lives now. Where she lives is actually in the Linwood Lewis portion of the district. I hear she has some other plans.
All right.
If I can elaborate on those other plans quickly, the rumor is that she is eyeing a council role. I did speak with her very briefly about that maybe a week and a half ago, and she was keeping mum on that.
Is eyeing what? A council?
A city council run.
That is one of the rumors.
Okay.
There's another one.
There's another one? Care to share, inquiring minds? All right.
Yes, I think we need to look at this also in a more idealistic way. The state commission that Governor McDonald named, and which the Virginia pilot commendably covered very thoroughly, better than anybody else in this state, both editorially and in the news pages and columns. There are 3 principles, idealistically. One is compactness of districts. The other, contiguity of district lines. And third, community of interest. Right. Now, the governor pointed out that these plans, House and Senate, have flaws, both counts. He only saw fit to single out the Senate plan. The House plan, implicitly, he said there were problems, but he really didn't go into that. And we understand why he didn't politically. So I don't know if the U.S. Department of Justice will look into such things. I doubt that they will, but I would like to see them do that. The other thing I think we need to speculate about, not necessarily here today, but what will the courts do? Because we're going to get another round of court decisions on redistricting. The decisions we have to date, population is the fundamental criterion. Race can be considered, but it cannot be the dominant consideration. So other than population equity, that's it. Well, will this U.S. Supreme Court begin to look at other considerations?
That's interesting.
So.
The other thing I wonder about on this, and you point up that redistricting process, there was the governor's bipartisan commission, which was advisory in nature, and there was this college competition, which was fascinating.
It was.
Awesome.
And they did a great job. They did a fantastic job of drawing districts that met all the criteria that Professor Dunn just described. What was amazing to me was how well this could be done if you didn't consider the politics of the people who are already in these seats. That wasn't a concern. They just drew good districts.
And that's what this does actually, if the Justice Department decides to really take a look. Yeah. For the first time, there are already alternative maps.
Right.
See the existence of the maps that have been put out by the bipartisan redistricting commission, as well as the maps from the college competition. See, in the past, it's been difficult to argue because we don't have any. We never had any alternatives. Sure. Well, here we've got a pile of alternatives. We've got alternatives that have already been ranked based on their meeting the criteria. We already know that there's a better way to draw the lines than the way the legislature did it. So if justice takes it on, they already have an alternative.
And then there is all this the computer data too that really any of us can go and try to. We could. There's data available. We could all, if we didn't have anything better to do on a Friday night than watch this broadcast, could probably go online and call up the numbers and take a look at it ourselves. It was interesting because on the radio show that. Hearsay 89.5 noon to 1 that we did. We talked about this college competition, and we had one of the young people who, and I think we did it on this broadcast too. We had one of the young people who participated in that, and he said that when they went to the legislature, what the legislators said is, "Gosh, sorry, we just didn't get it in time." When in fact, he said, we gave it to them before the public hearings that were taking place around the state. So if that's the case, he says, and if you look at it, you could sort of understand his point. He says, little disingenuous to suggest that you didn't have time, and doesn't that render meaningless then the public hearings?
Oh yes, and we have to let's look at what the commission did. We had 4 hearings, various parts of the state. We had about 140 people come. About 70 testified. We had one here at Norfolk State, which was the best attended and probably the best testimony presented of any one of them. I sat through that and I thought, boy, these people have thought this through. We are getting an energized and exercised population that's saying, hold on, state legislature, you're pulling wool over our eyes, and we'd like to have these matters seriously considered. So it's too late now, it would appear, with regard to state legislature. Go ahead.
It is, except that we do have an opportunity to think about getting a constitutional amendment in place to set up for a nonpartisan or bipartisan redistricting coalition for 10 years from now. It's very difficult to get a constitutional amendment in Virginia. It's going to take a couple of election cycles in order to do it, simply by the very nature of it. But assuming that Bill Bolling is the Republican nominee for governor in 2013, I hope that everyone will remind him that he was one of the members of the redistricting coalition back in 2008, one of the ones who actually kind of drug Bob McDonnell over the line to bring him on board, because Bob McDonnell was not a member of the redistricting coalition back in 2008. So, in fact, I've already asked the question of Bill Bolling of whether or not, if he is elected governor, he will help to get that legislation done. And he says that he will, because he believes, I think that he believes in the process. It's not just, for him, it's not just, you know, lip service, which kind of is what the appointment of the bipartisan commission after the fact with no teeth was kind of lip service.
Well, there are a couple points to make there, though. One of which is that whether the commission had no teeth or not, the governor does get to say correctly that he fulfilled the campaign promise, because he did. He was very careful in putting out his white papers. He said, I will either submit legislation or establish a commission. So he has fulfilled that campaign pledge. Another thing to bear in mind, to your point about the college competition, there was at least one William and Mary student-drawn map that was submitted in the legislature. It did not go anywhere, but it was submitted. And a third point that I think is worth bringing up is that while we discuss the public hearings that were held, I've had several people say to me, the reason that this doesn't take root is because there really isn't the public engagement, because no one truly feels disenfranchised. You still get to vote if you haven't lost your right to vote. And so, other than people that really care about this, does it resonate? Does it make a difference in the public? And so while we can have all these high-minded discussions about, you know, incumbent protection and are they truly representing the people, you've got to have a groundswell from the people to get this change. And there has not been that, which is one of the reasons that you cannot get true bipartisan redistricting legislation through the General Assembly.
Well, it has passed the Senate, and it gets killed in a 7 a.m. meetings of the P&E subcommittee,
Privileges and
election subcommittees in the House. I think that when you go back to look at what happened in 08, which was where we had the real big push for the redistricting coalition, I mean, when you see what happened there, it wasn't that the people weren't engaged. It was the legislature killed it. And so until such time as the citizens hold the legislators' feet to the fire.
But that's the point.
What it's going to have to take.
Though. I'm not saying that the people aren't engaged. I'm saying, are enough people engaged to force them to say, this is the will of the public, we need to react, or we potentially will be tossed out of office.
I mean, do you think that people realize that it doesn't really matter what they do in the ballot box? What matters is what these guys do every decade?
Correct.
This determines who your representatives are as much as the vote you cast.
Well, but there's
even more so. I say even more so, because if you are, for example, if we can look at minorities, we can look at any group that is shrunken down in a given district. If you're a Democrat in a Republican, overwhelmingly Republican district, then your vote really doesn't count. It really doesn't matter. And one of the things that we heard from the very beginning, because I went to a lot of those hearings myself, one of the things I heard, that it wasn't a partisan argument. The argument that I heard from Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians and everybody was they wanted to keep their communities of interest together. When they split the 87th House District virtually down the middle, that is not keeping a community of interest together.
I moved a couple miles away. Couple miles between cycles, and my representation changed.
But there's one other thing to bear in mind, which is this, that in years past, we have had Democrats in the state and Republicans in the state draw maps that benefited their parties.
Yes.
And what happened? In both of those instances, in the past 2 decades, we have seen a shift in the opposite direction. Republicans were in control of the Senate in 2001. What happened? Democrats are in control now. What happened in this past decade? Democrats made gains in the Republican-controlled House of Delegates, came very close, and then receded. But whether that's through happenstance or whether that's through an educated electorate, I don't think you can game the system. But sometimes the public will still, whether it's a wave election, whether it's just circumstance.
I disagree. I totally disagree.
That
Because
shocks me.
there's a fundamental argument that I learned from some of the folks who actually go through the process of drawing the lines. And the argument is, do you redistrict for party or for people? Mm-hmm. The Republicans in the House, and this idea of the House drawing their lines and the Senate drawing their lines is nothing new. This is the way it's always been done. So the Republicans in the House in 2001 drew the lines to protect party. The Republicans in the Senate in 2001 drew the lines to protect people. As the result, when those people lost their seats, there was no replacement because the districts were not drawn with the supermajorities. When you look at the House and you look at, yes, the Democrats they went up in numbers and then they went back down, but even as close as they never got close enough where you were ever going to have a switchover in the cycle. It was going to take, when we were looking at 2009 and saying we've got to, trying to look at the numbers, that they were already down so many seats that the most number of seats that have ever changed hands in an election is 4. So if you're down 8 seats, you got to have at least 2 cycles in order to fix it, and you're going to lose some in the process. So that's.
Go ahead, Dr.
Yes. Let's look at the positive side of this. Positively, let's commend Governor McDonnell for naming a bipartisan commission. Let's commend the commission that was indeed bipartisan, functioned clearly that way. And Governor McDonnell, in his executive order, said you cannot consider partisanship, levels of competition. You only have those 3 criteria you could consider. The commission executed its work to a T based upon that executive order and the orders from the governor. Let's look further at this. If a commission like that, which you had half Republicans, half Democrats, and they work very well together, something can be done. Then let's look at the testimony before these hearings around the state. We had quite a few elected officials, mayors, county officials, state legislators testifying, saying they want something done. So I think there's a network around the state to force this.
And then with technology on top of it.
Yes, that's correct. In the state of Illinois, it used to have a cumulative voting, which we'll not go into here, and multi-member districts. And we had a proposal out of the Illinois Constitutional Convention, which I served as counsel of the Legislative Committee, to abolish these multi-member districts. There's hardly any competition in any given year. Well, that did not pass muster before the electorate after the convention met. But 6 years later, there had been a crisis. There had been some corruption breakout in the legislature. So watch for an event.
Unknowns, right?
You watch for an event where this nucleus of people and the media can take advantage of that and push this forward.
We have just about 3 minutes left, and we want to be sure to talk about the trial that started this week. Former Delegate Phil Hamilton from Newport News. Jillian, you've been covering the case, and we expect it to go into next week, do we not?
That is what the judge indicated yesterday on the opening day,
Yeah.
or Monday, I should say, on the opening day.
And so what are you observing about that case and about the way it's taking shape in the courtroom?
The government's case seems to be based on a glut of emails that former Delegate Hamilton exchanged with a number of Old Dominion University officials. The government seems to be trying to build a case that says Phil Hamilton secured state government funding for this teacher training center in exchange for a paid position with that facility. And then when it became apparent that people were sniffing around it, he sought to conceal that arrangement.
And so that trial we expect to go into next week. And I know, Vivian, you think this trial, regardless of how it works out, is suggestive of something larger that has to do with...
Absolutely, the fact that we need to pay our legislatures more money, because of the mere fact that we're talking about a $40,000 a year job. We're not talking about a $400,000 a year job. Hamilton needed the money. And at some point, we've got to...
The House of Delegates members make what, $17,500? Something like that, somewhere in that range.
The Senate makes $18. plus the allowance that they get for the office. I would be remiss if I left that out. But the bottom line is that a lot of people, we're in a situation where we have reduced the number of people who can serve. Virginia's legislature may be the longest continuously meeting legislature in the country, but they like to meet between planting season. So as a result, we've reduced the pool, and so I think we should pay people. They work half-time, pay them half-time money.
So you're not arguing for a full-time legislature.
No.
You're saying let's pay them more for what they're doing.
Pay them for how much they work, which is more than just simply when the legislature is in session.
Have you opined on this in the pages of the pilot?
I'm not sure that we've taken up the salary that our legislators make. I have a personal opinion on that. I think Vivian's not far off, but it is nevertheless a part-time legislature, and I'll defer to Professor Dunn on this one.
30 seconds. You can do it.
Yes, we all know that famous quote. When the legislature is in session, fear for your life.
All right, and with great respect and apologies to the lawmakers who represent us, we'll have to end it there. How about that? Will that be all right? Thanks so much for being with us. What a great conversation. We will continue the conversation, as they say, as the weeks and months go on. By the way, thank you for watching us as well, and you can watch this program again or any of our past broadcasts. Visit our website. It's whatmatters.tv, and that's where you can also find loads of ways to get in touch with us, and you can join us as a fan on Facebook as well. And for more local talk on the radio, I sure hope you'll join us for Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV FM or online, WHRV.org. We are live each weekday, noon to 1, and we'll be glad to take your calls there as well. I'm Kathy Lewis. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.